For more on this rapidly evolving story, I'm joined by Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc. Hi, Minister. It's good to see you. Thank you very much for making the time.
Hey, good morning, Vashi. Happy to be here.
I thought I'd start just trying to make sense on behalf of Canadians because they heard of the possibility of even more tariffs, more specific to dairy and lumber. If anything officially in that capacity has been communicated to you?
No, not at all. We took note of the president's sort of public comments, but we're trying in as much as is possible, Vashi, to focus our efforts on the actual sort of legal texts of either executive orders or remission orders that the Commerce Secretary does, so we're trying not to be distracted as would easily be the case by public comments and focus on the actual substantive sort of documents or decisions that the administration makes. But we haven't seen anything specific with respect to that, certainly, as we sit here doing this interview now.
Okay, I think Canadians are certainly searching and fully acknowledging, I fully acknowledge that the answer might not be readily apparent, but searching for kind of a broader strategy behind going after our country in this way. And today the New York Times is reporting that Howard Lutnick told you that Trump, 1, wants to eject Canada out of the Five Eyes, 2, wants to tear up the agreements that govern how Canada and the U.S. share the Great Lakes, and 3, that he's reviewing military cooperation between our two countries, including NORAD. Is that true?
I'm not going to comment, and I saw the New York Times article. I don't know who spoke to the New York Times. It's certainly a reputable international publication, but I'm not going to discuss the private conversations that I've had with Secretary Lutnick. I'm trying to work with Howard to have all of the tariffs removed as they apply to Canadian businesses and Canadian exporters. I'm going to just stay focused on that.
But beyond that, again, the Prime Minister himself said that the reason for these punishing tariffs is to seek to destroy our economy, which will make it easier to annex us. In that vein, are there other things on the table? And I understand if you don't want to be specific about a private conversation, but as a person who is in communication with the administration, are there other things on the table that Canadians need to worry about beyond even these punishing tariffs?
For the moment, no. And again, conversations are what they are. We're focused on decisions that the United States government can make that will obviously affect the Canadian economy and Canadian workers. Our focus is to have all of these tariffs removed. We'll look for ways to have them lifted as quickly as possible.
Do you think he is ultimately motivated, though, by wanting to take us over? Do you think Donald Trump wants to take us over?
Vashi, I'm not a psychiatrist. I wasn't very good in math and sciences. I went to law school. I'm not a doctor. I don't pretend to imagine what motivates people. My job as the finance minister is to do what I can to defend Canada's economy, to help our economy be competitive, to grow, to be prosperous. And to be honest, our government's job has to be to deal with the decisions of the U.S. government, to work to defend Canada's economic interests. I don't speculate on what motivates either the president or people in his administration. I try and work as best as I can with the people that have been elected or appointed under the American Constitution to do these jobs.
I don't necessarily, though, ask it, Minister, with respect as a question of motivation. The Prime Minister was unequivocal that he is trying to annex us. You are involved in those conversations. I think the degree to which or the method or mode by which we respond is going to be informed by how far we think the President wants to take this. Based on your involvement, which has been very much at the forefront of all of this, do you think Donald Trump wants to take Canada over?
But again, Vashi, he said that publicly in terms of annexation. It's insulting. At a minimum, it's insulting. I think it's properly generated a reaction on the part of Canadians for which I'm very proud. That's never going to happen. So the president can talk about that. He can speculate on that. That's not going to happen. And Canadians aren't interested in any substantive conversations in that regard. They want us to build an independent, proud, sovereign country that has the most productive, competitive, prosperous economy that we can have. So that's what I'm focused on.
You mentioned in those words that you're very focused as the Minister of Finance on the economy, on making it competitive and productive. And I wanted to put to you something that Mark Carney said who's of course in the running to be the leader of the Liberals, the next Prime Minister. The announcement will come tonight. He said during one of the debates that took place during this leadership contest that the economy was weak, the Canadian economy was weak before Donald Trump came. Do you agree with that assessment?
I think we can always strengthen the Canadian economy. In my conversations with Mark Carney, we've talked about how to make our economy more productive, more competitive, how to remove some of the barriers, perhaps some of the drags that have developed over time. I've said it's like snow in front of the plow for a whole bunch of reasons. What can we do as a federal government to deal with the competitiveness challenge of the United States and to diversify global economic opportunities? Those are my conversations with Mark Carney, and we'll see who later on today, who the Liberal Party selects as the next Prime Minister. But some of the structural economic challenges that our country faces remain, and the next government of Canada will very much be seized with those challenges and working our way through it, I think, in a successful way.
I mean, your party will also be making that pitch to Canadians against the backdrop, right, of this threat that we face now from Donald Trump. Why should they trust you to move the snow out of the way when you've been putting in front of that plow for the last 10 years?
Because I think the existential threat to Canada's economic prosperity is the uncertainty created by the Trump administration. It's the tariffs that they apply and then suspend and then talk publicly about other potential tariff measures. This uncertainty is very corrosive to the Canadian economy. I think that Canada will want a leader and a government that is able to stand up and protect the Canadian economy while working with the American administration that's in office to remove these tariffs as quickly as possible and to continue to build a strong North American economic circumstance. That's been the success of our countries for decades. And as you know, the first free trade agreement was President Reagan and Brian Mulroney. And it has been to the economic benefit of both countries. This is an aberration. This sort of circumstance coming out of the United States is an aberration over the last 40 years. Canadians will look to political leaders that are able to defend the economy, but also chart a path forward for sustained economic growth. And when and if the election comes in the coming weeks or later in 2025, we know there'll be an election in 2025, Vashi, so Canadians will have that choice.
And certainly, I think every Canadian would agree with the idea that it's an aberration, right? And to be clear, in the questions I'm posing to you, I'm not blaming your government for the way Donald Trump is acting. But I am asking, like the way that you're speaking about, snow in front of the plow or a lack of competitiveness, productivity has been languishing for years in this country under your watch. GDP per capita has been on the decrease under your watch. You are asking Canadians to trust you to build big resource projects that you have thus far failed to do. Why should they believe that why should they essentially trust you to do something that you have been unable to thus far, or unwilling?
Yeah, so I don't share your absolutist conclusions. We're the first government to build a major piece of pipeline infrastructure from Edmonton to the coast of British Columbia. The Trans Mountain Pipeline, from my meetings with oil executives in Calgary, is one example of a transformational thing that our government did. We have made over the last 10 years decisions that we think are in the interest of building a sustainable, prosperous economy. There are a whole series of factors, some domestic, some global, which make these decisions at various moments complicated. Doesn't mean, Vashi, that our government hasn't achieved economic success for the country. We believe that's the case. But in a democracy, when a prime minister leaves and a party chooses a new leader, and we've followed the 4 candidates who ultimately will be are on the ballot, and one of whom will become Prime Minister designate later today. They have offered different ideas to build a prosperous Canadian economy. I'm confident that coming out of the decision tonight, the Prime Minister designate will be in a position to offer Canadians, when the election comes this year, a series of measures that will continue to grow the Canadian economy and will deal with challenges that 6 months ago or a year ago were perhaps not so obvious and have become very obvious over the last number of weeks.
To be fair, though, Minister, it's not my absolutist conclusions. Mark Carney, again, who could be the leader of your party, explicitly described the economy as weak. And when you reference TMX, you're absolutely right. That purchase has led to, an additional 0.5% to the GDP on an annual basis. But you had to purchase that pipeline because commercial entities did not think it was viable in the regulatory environment that your government created.
The regulatory environment was one of the questions at the time. There was a series of other de-risking decisions that the government made. Fact is, it's a successful contribution to Canada's resource economy. So, Vashi, I'm confident that the new Liberal leader, whomever he or she is later today, will be in a position to offer Canadians both a team and a series of policies that will deal with the most pressing threat facing the Canadian economy now, which is the actions of the Trump administration in the United States. So more than all of these others, I think Canadians understand that that remains the crisis moment that we have to rise up to and deal with. I'm confident that our option, when the election ultimately happens, will be the one that will prevail. But the good thing is a campaign is a minimum of about 5 weeks. So Canadians will have all kinds of opportunities to see these ideas at play.
Okay, I'll leave it on that note. Minister, appreciate your time as always. Thank you so much.